one step closer to the truth, all at distinctive locations, wired up, fired up, on fire for the Lord, in exactly the place you need to be for the message to sink in for edification. Oh, Paco knows those academic terms too, such as when I say ampifugal lymphocanosis. I know some people know what it means and why the word ampifugal lymphocanosis, is so important to me. What it means and why the word is so important for Golden Age past theology. Luther, did you smile? You told me once you smile when I say ampifugal lymphocanosis. It's where the arrow is pointing here. See the arrow? Where is that arrow? Where's my hand? Right here. See, my hand is trying to go to where, you know, right up here, it leads to a space that gets hot. Man, I am not showing the ampifugal lymphocanosis. The word is even there somewhere on this screen. And I did this to try to not do it. See, because I'm reading it in reverse right now. But you can probably, there it is. See where the curve is, the oxbow, like in the river here, where my sweater is bleeding into it, where that blue arrow is. That's where water condenses in our brain behind the eyeball. And I was supposed to do it with this recording to save time. That's a story for another day. I want to talk about the fake world money on the fake day of the Nicolaitan religion that people were warned about in the book of Revelation. Welcome, everybody, to Mud Flood Was Armageddon. The Mud Flood was the Armageddon. Don't let them tell you anything else unless they're willing to debate you in a fair and honest way. Let's get the statement out of the way. I believe we're showing the statement, the fair use statement. Believe so. Got some copyright. You know what? I think I can close that one now. Little background about the money thing. Look, trillions. That's what is that? 999 million billions? Yeah, plus one extra billion. It's a lot. It's missing. And this is from how long ago? Where did this money go? Right before the lock it down.
Billion in 2015. So it was like 54 times. And I have a background in economics, public budgeting, public finance, and I thought that's impossible. You can't come up with that many transactions that are unsupported or transactions that can't be accounted for on a $122 billion budget. So, I've listened to Catherine on a number of interviews, and I thought, I really respected her, and I thought, but this cannot be right. And so I found the report myself. It bothered me. I found it on the OIG website. I started reading it, and I was just astounded. And and there's a few details in there. It's pretty vague, so it's hard to pull out exactly what's going on. And that motivated me to contact Catherine. I said, well, let's just throw a couple of graduate students. We'll sift through thousands of existing reports dating back to pre-Rumsfeld era and just see what we can find. And we decided to focus on HUD, Housing and Urban Development, which we found about $1 trillion of unsupported adjustments. And HUD's budget is much smaller than the DOD. And then we found an additional 20 trillion for the DoD. And sometimes it would show up in an Army report or Navy or Air Force or overall. And
they're talking trillions when the budget was 120 billion. That's not in the same ballpark. Yet they end up missing. Here's another 6 trillion. It happened on 9/11. It looks like it's always going back to the 2001, the September 11th thing.
you go back a few years and there was another report for so many hundreds of billions or a trillion here, a trillion there. And so it's not clear, right? It doesn't make sense to me that you would issue a report for, let's say 2007, and then somehow in 2015 there would be a reaccumulation. I don't think that's what's going on, although it's unclear.
As so many other things in this story are unclear. All right, so let's talk about your attempts to try to clarify this. This seems like if the Office of Inspector General is issuing these reports, then there is some public interface with this data in some way, at least through the OIG. So they would be receptive to sharing this data in some form with researchers like yourself?
Well, initially, I had been interacting with somebody at the Office of the Inspector General. At one point, I had a phone call with 2 or 3 people, and I just was trying to get a handle on
It's missing trillions.
questions as well. How could you get accounts payable of 900 billion in transactions that we don't know about? What were those for? And again, no response. And some people have said, well, it can be internal.
Hey, look, it's the Rosicrucians, it's the Freemasons. You're set up. You worry about the money, and also in the back of your mind, you're thinking, how did they do these things? Again, with the Manchester, England, and what's going on. Look, these are ropes. And they were making clothes, I think clothes for not a trillion, not a billion, but millions in one factory.
Massive loop basically, and went up to the various floors of the mill. And you can see from this picture here that the just the manufacture of the ropes themselves was a whole industry. There was a whole science behind the manufacture of these ropes. Right, Jake, so we're stood now in the main engine hall. Is that the right term?
Yes.
And we're looking at those 2, what I see as white wheels that you're going to turn.
Okay, so that's some of the pictures, or what I called for in some of the pictures. Make sure it looks like I'm sharing. So here's from the downloads. Let's see what I got. Some of these. A box water wheel, 1765. That's when these things were made in Manchester. The 17th century, 1700s. That's the 18th century. Entrance to this water-filled tunnel was at Castle Cray, created by cutting back the escarpment, that's a solid cliff of stone, on the site of what would become Grocer's Warehouse. To this date, the wharf did not include any warehouse structures. That's a picture. A screenshot. Look at this weir. Concrete poured to flow to power the town. The Duke of Bridgewater had it going on there. That was his cattle field. Don't run in there. But this was only one little section of the industrial area of a big industrial town. Look at this. This is what the guy said. We don't know what it is. I don't know what it is. I don't know why it does that. It just ends, and underneath the town, it's unbelievable because they don't know anything about how it's the bodies of the Titans were cleaned out, used their veins and arteries to find gold, and their blood vessels to make tunnels. their lungs to move air, copy it. This is a door panel of what it looks like now, but 11 years ago, it looked like this. That's what he said in this video. I don't know if I have that part pulled up, but you can see a lot of different foundation work. They do the same thing. They did everything together. 10% of British officers and 4% of enlisted men experienced shell shock. And we know their shell shock isn't comparable to what they call PTSD nowadays, where, somebody can get that from claiming they're a woman and being told they're a man. That just could blow them away because they're not ready for that. But officers, 10%, which would be maybe, what is that? 1 out of 100 of the people in the Army or a Navy. And then the 4% of the enlisted people, most of it. So more people got it, but why? Why did some people get it more? So it was by the spring of 1918, World War I was poised to play a role. That's the United States. It didn't declare war, until 1917, slowly building up, 10,000 arriving each day. Most of the ground fighting for the U.S. took place on the Western Front. At sea, the Navy would play a key role, ongoing battles. 116,000 American servicemen were killed for nothing. Initially, slow start mobilizing for the United States. They basically had declared war. They were only in it for 19 months of a 4-year war. But it was only by spring of 18 that the nation was ready to poised to play a role in the conflict. That's April, May, June. When is summer? June, July, August, and then November it was ending. They knew they had signed the armistice, and yet we still lost this many people because they fought up until the day of, like it was going off. The end of the battle, over 1,350,000 artillery shells had been fired by both sides in an area of 6.2 miles by 6.2 miles. Frantic arm race, developing new break the stalemate, kill the people before an armistice that is still in existence. The only thing feasible to carry out this idea is a secret society gradually absorbing the wealth of the world. Good job, Cecil Rhodes. You did it. The idea for development of the English-speaking race was the foundation of a society copied as to organization from the Jesuits. What a shock. His aims and his believed, even in it was a hidden open secret that they believed the wealthy secret society should work to secure the world's peace for a British American Federation. That's what these guys like Cecil Rhodes, Baron Hirsch, and W.T. Stead thought. They were big three. G2G Pancho Pete, son of man, he's showing that there's a difference between male and female skulls. That's how they can tell, huh? And they found somebody buried. It's not like, no, they had a dopamine in their brain figure and tell them, no, they're a girl. So it was born a man, made a girl. The air that caused the Dolly crash, that's the Francis Scott Key Bridge, where it drove into the bridge and shut down shipping. One more thing to cripple it. It said, well, its label wasn't set right, so it didn't get a good connection. Well, maybe that one wire, what are the odds that that one wire could have been the wire that controlled turning it on and off so that it would steer into the thing. I believe that could have happened. I really do. So we're looking at pictures. Social development, racial relations among gender. So that's still going on, huh? And the Oklahoma University removes a teaching assistant who gave a failing grade, a 0 on an essay, because she said, no, there's really only men and women have women desires. Like she said that in her paper, she wants to be a woman and have a baby. She got a 0. So they fired the teacher, but they're rising up in protest. Another Zion pump beam. Did I go over that one? They still don't know how they build these things. It's a weird million people town, that Manchester. And there's that rope thing. Look at that factory. That ropes powered these. In case you weren't getting a big enough idea when I said, they made enough clothes, millions of whatever you were making there. This is the rope, the big wheel thing that you saw looking down at it. This is all that's left. They saved to say, hey, look how these steam engines work, but they don't show this. They only show this building. I just thought this glazed part of the machine, I don't know what it's for. It's part of that rope moving thing. We are going to pick it back up in that video where that guy is spinning it. But I want you to see that this is what's left. This little part, this building here. Nothing where you can look down on the rope anymore. And this was only one of the, there were tons of mills around there. This is the exact one. See what's left? There's some extra wheels and stuff. They're really proud. They got it running. They keep it running. Show it off. It's a museum. Tourists come to see it. Make it hot. That's a lot of horsepower. Of course, you're going to make 1 million shirts or pajamas. You got to have something reliable, man. So you see, these are different mills. People used to live in this and be happy. They didn't really own anything. They didn't think they owned the land. They had a mama and a plan for some yummy food that night, maybe a fire and some songs. Hit the sack and get up and grind some corn. What's this one? Cost of living much? Was it? Oh, Colorado's going poor. Thanks for reminding me of that, Zach. We got to get back to that video.
What do they do? Why 2? And what do they do?
Well, so originally, there had been just one valve there, which is called a stop valve. And that's the same thing as a regulator on a steam locomotive. It is just the main cut-off point from steam from the boiler into the engine, open it and close it. The little one's called a warming valve. And originally,
the engine was taken out of service. Finally, in 1982, the Ellen Road Spinning Company ceased trading and the mill closed and stood derelict until 1985 when it was demolished. Guess what survived? Now, the Ellen Road Trust is a team of volunteers and they've been working hard here since...
It'd be so much cooler if they would have let the ropes survive. But do we need... I guess they got factories with these type of machines in third world countries.
It's 1985, trying to preserve this engine house, the boilers and the wonderful mill engine. Admission is £7.50, but fantastic, well worth it. And your money basically goes towards paying for running costs of this machine and for coal. Coal is expensive now, and they steam up once a month on the first Sunday of the month, but they don't open it
from Colombia. But essentially, what we're dealing with is slack. If you look at the quality of the coal, it's like
oh, it's sizzling.
Good, good, very
Good.
nice.
Very good.
Let's see what we got here. This isn't the main story, but I did want you to see, get your mind around. This is something that the Lord showed me while I've been dealing with a toothache. Look at that. So that's what they call a caravan stop. Some of them are made to last, right? I mean, you clean that up, fix it up. 20, 30 men, couple of months, boom, you're in business. And, you know, maybe they'll start making them into tourist attractions. If it wasn't for that judgment that we're under right now, for all believe, you know, is it our fault we were lied to? And some people believed it. God opened our eyes. That looks like that weir in that one video we watched. I can't imagine there was water there. People live there. It's where they stopped for the caravans after all the water quit running to the sea and just bubbled up in certain places. What do we got here? This, I found a Flickr page that no thanks. It was, they took so many good pictures and they tour like Lancashire. Well, we'll look at see, you know. So I thought, well, that might be cool. So I didn't know that you could, you know, here's something, this stone laid by Raymond Montague. I really think they've been resetting it all the way. And it was just, you know, now I don't know if I'll ever get back to it, but it was interesting. I was able to look through. Look how many pages they have. And they're all just of England. Old aqueducts, whatever these people saw to take a picture of. I think they're cool. I mean, these are the things, man. So there's that. Another one of those, you know, this is another one of those cotton mills that could make a million different types of clothes. Interesting, huh? Check this out. This is such a fake, man. It looks like this is the latest, the short route. He wrote this to they're saying Epstein, this is his suicide note that proved he committed suicide by writing a letter to Larry Nassar. And Larry Nassar, in case you don't remember, it was the head trainer for the United States Women Olympic team, all those gold medal girls. He was rubbing their private parts so that, and I guess he had a crew that, you know, if you were going to be elite in our sporting venues, Larry Nassar and his crew, thousands of gymnasts were abused because that's what they do. This man is very suspicious that the letter is real. He's got me doubting it.
Okay, so in this latest document dump from the Department of Justice, there is a letter that is purportedly from Jeffrey Epstein to Larry Nassar. Okay, I've seen a lot of theories, and one of the best theories that I have seen about this letter came from Adam Cochran. So the Department of Justice said that they are currently looking into the validity of this alleged letter from Jeffrey Epstein to Larry Nassar, and that they're going to follow up as soon as possible. And they said, in the meantime, 3 facts stand out. The postmark on the envelope is Virginia, not New York, where Jeffrey Epstein was jailed at the time. The return address listed the wrong jail where Epstein was held and did not include his inmate number, which is required for outgoing mail. The envelope was processed 3 days after Epstein's death. Okay, here's the thing. The DOJ may have accidentally exposed a huge cover-up. I do think, as well as like Adam Cochran and others, that the letter is fake. And initially, everybody's like, well, maybe the lawyer wrote it for him. But what if it was planted by Bill Barr? to cover up Epstein's death. Now, as I go through this, I'm going to talk more slowly than I normally do. And you're probably going to want to pause and things like that. Okay? So, if you pull the MCC records of commissary, it shows that they did stock blank postcards in packs of 6, something you'd have to be familiar with to fake. Okay? But Epstein's receipts don't show any purchase of postcards. The closest was a single envelope. So you can see right here, they have the greeting cards available and stuff like that.
Jumping ahead, proving it's stamped wrong, dated wrong.
This shows where something entered the post office mail system, and the stamp was marked as used. This letter entered the post service not from MCC, but from a Northern Virginia processing facility in the 220 range of zip codes. Now, that's right outside Washington, D.C., and includes the offices for, say, the Department of Defense, the CIA, and other government agencies. And according to stamp collecting websites, the code matches the same cancel pattern that was in use at the time, meaning it was authentically mailed from this region and not MCC. Okay, the first option, file release. And the handwriting looks nothing like the letter. You know, you can see it right here. Okay? It doesn't look anything like the letter. The postcard writing doesn't look like anything Epstein would write either. Epstein would spell wrong. Epstein had horrible grammar. Epstein also signed his name with a very sloppy loop mark. Okay, so this writing, that doesn't look like Epstein at all. You can see Jeffrey Epstein's signature here. See, it just looks like some kind of sideways 8 or something. In fact, Epstein's writing is hard to find because he mostly had Ghislaine take notes for him. His writing is this was 3 days after his last lawyer visit. And on the same day he died, making it deeply unlikely it would be his lawyer, as it took ages to mail. So that leaves us with a set of criteria. Someone who knew that Nassar was moved. Someone who had similar penmanship. Someone who had a connection to Epstein. And it just so happens that Bill Barr, the son of Epstein's first boss, was the attorney general under Trump at the time. Barr was in charge of the case. Barr was alerted to Epstein's death. Barr had inside access to the case. Barr knew about the birthday book. And where did Barr live at the time? A custom-built house in McLean, Virginia, in the Northern Virginia processing region, with zip code starting with 220. Northern Virginia 220. Sure, he adopted a long tail off, as does the letter in the signature. Like, see the Epstein, see the Barr? See that long kind of tail off? And for an initial, he uses a flared letter with a sharp point, notably spaced from the letter. The single dot is clean with no motion. And the letter does this as well. You can see the P and the bar, and you can see the J for the Epstein. Lastly, is the fact the letters are darker on the ends. So this is a...
So I was looking at, this is where I got that numbers for how many shells were used at one time in World War I. How do you get people to line up and march to what they call a sure death? Because you're trying to prove your manhood, show me your mettle, preserve our way of life. It's these guys.
The French 75 was designed by Colonel Joseph Albert Depot, director of the Atelier de Construction de Poteaux, APX State Arsenal, from 1890 and was commissioned into the French Army in 1898. Depot wanted to create a field gun that was more accurate and powerful than the existing artillery pieces. He also wanted to create a gun 15 rounds per minute. Compared crew were capable of firing about 15 rounds per minute, compared to previous guns, which were limited to about 2 shells per minute. Explosive shells to break enemy trench lines.
Here's your guns. Go charge. You know, sit around for a month, but when we blow the whistle, only half of you are going to die. That's their motivation. 60 million people, hey, they're missing 6.5 trillion in the last 4 years. Oh, wait, that was from a long time ago when the budget was only 122 billion. They list 6.9. Hey, tinfoil, what do you got?
Everything was good. And then all of a sudden, the Federal Reserve is printing $60 billion. And I didn't know a tenth of what I know now back then, but I knew enough back then to know something was majorly wrong there. That just doesn't smell right. And that you didn't get the answer in the mainstream financial press. It just wasn't out there. There was nothing but Fed speak and, oh, this is normal. And like you said, ample reserves. Sure, it's totally normal. I knew it wasn't normal. And that led me to YouTube. I mean, at this point, I'm already, in YouTube University. I just bought a big house. And so everything I need to learn how to do, to fix, to maintain, I'm on YouTube learning it. So I go to YouTube for the answers. Found a channel called Heresy Financial run by my friend Joe Brown, who I've since met and worked with, really smart guy. And he had a very good explanation that, just basically said they have borrowed too much. They literally borrowed all the money in the world, and now they need to make more and lend it to the government. This is a bailout of government spending. It's finally caught up with them. And, our whole life we've been hearing how we need to cut spending here in the States, and we always pay lip service to it, at least during election seasons, and then do nothing about it. So that was a very big event. And as far as, was that like the cause of COVID? What's the Hanlon's razor? Never.
Occam's razor?
Well, Occam's razor is the simplest explanation, is usually the right one.
Oh, sorry.
Hanlon's razor is a little bit less known. It's never
attribute to malice.
Never attribute to malice that which can be explained by simple stupidity. I probably butchered the phrase there.
My deal is malice should be first, because they want to muddy the water. Now, a little bit more, the Buffett index, a little bit more, is the party over? I don't want to forget to show you some more pictures here, because I know I had some more. Let's see. Maybe I didn't. I thought I had more pictures of when he was in the tunnels. But I don't see him. Maybe I have him set up on the... But he shows the roof of the tunnels and how it changed. And that was going to be a big part of this presentation. Huh. Wow. Point was to show you the video later, so that's the way we'll do it.
Value versus real money since the year 2000. In fact, I think the year 2000 was when we entered the greatest depression on planet Earth. Did you hear about it? Did you read about it? No, you didn't, because they flooded the system with fake money. They created a housing bubble, which actually is way, way worse now. The housing bubble we had going into the GFC, which kind of papered over the cracks when the economy was collapsing. Remember, tech went nowhere for a decade. They created the mortgage-backed security. They created the housing bubble. Well, going into the housing bubble, the median house price in California versus the median salary, it was only 4.5 times a multiple of the house price versus salary. Today, it's nearly 11. The median house price today in California is $900,000. How are those baristas affording $900,000 houses? I'm telling you, my friends, they're not. They've got a lot of debt. Is a multiple of 11. The median salary is about 85K, which, for Starbucks isn't too bad. But how many baristas are we going to need in the greatest depression in history? I don't think we're going to need that many. So I think what it says. Dave said, when you think about the world's obsession with gold, it's easy to get caught up in the adventure and mystery and the mystery. Like,
man, I'm telling you, I'm not giving any advice on what to do with buying silver or gold right now. But, who sent me this video? This is what we're dealing with.
And how is that? How is that? I'm trying to explain to you, you're in the park after hours and you're committing a crime.
That's a
You're
crime.
not. It is.
Over 2 years ago, I showed you a video about a 62-year-old grandfather named Kevin Hinton. He was driving late one night on a road trip, returning from meeting his brand new baby granddaughter in Oregon. He was too tired to continue driving. He couldn't keep his eyes open, so he pulled over in a public parking lot in Spokane, Washington to take a nap. But then he was awakened by the arrival of Sergeant Clay Hilton with the Spokane County Sheriff's Office. And 3 minutes later, he would have 8 broken ribs, a punctured lung, a severe concussion, a shoulder injury, and a disfigured lip. Why? Because Sergeant Hilton thought this 62-year-old grandfather was rude to him.
Get on the ground! What part of that did you not understand?
You hit me so many times. Why? Why did you hit me?
You weren't listening.
But now, over 2 years later, there's a huge update to my original video about this. Sergeant Hilton has not only been fired, but is now facing federal criminal charges. Spokane County Sheriff John Knowles fired Hilton last year for this misconduct and I guess other misconduct. Sheriff Knowles also disciplined the other officers who had responded to this scene after their internal investigation showed that some members of the sheriff's office, including supervisors, failed to meet the department's standards of conduct during and after the incident. And those would be the people who showed up and they're like laughing and joking with Hilton about having just beat up this grandfather. So now Hilton faces 20 years.
So now it's a warning that people, you're going to get, it's going to come back. These people are in secret societies, the cops, the Rosicrucians, the Freemasons, the Jesuits. We, hopefully you, are on a very narrow road. Now, here's a verse I want you to get your mind around. Ezekiel 34, 18 and 19. We're going to start with 19. Why must my flock feed on what your feet have trampled and drink what your feet have muddied? We'll look at it now, 18. Is it not enough for you to feed on the good pasture, that you must tread down with your feet the rest of your pasture, and to drink of clear water, that you must muddy the rest of the water with your feet? Well, that's their mindset. Their tender mercies are evil. Their tender mercies are evil. You need to know that. The United States in World War I, as I said, spring of 1918, the nation, United States, was poised to play a role. We only had cashed in money, but still, they pumped 1 million people over there, sacrificed 10% of them. It represents the climax of the progressive era. The United States gonna, take over and become a big deal because, Satan was loosed. Resets new. The Rosicrucians hit the ground running with rebuilding. They're the ones that had the plans. They're the ones that said, here's how you rebuild these factories. Get it back going so that, you can have some fake money to spend later. The United States did not get there to help, but this all goes back to this guy. He trained Patton, Eisenhower, MacArthur, everybody that was anybody, probably even Smedley Butler. They called it the 100-day offensive. It wasn't really an offensive. It was a grind down to where now the United States has got to have some people killed too. So they signed the 100-day deal here. As they say, the Germans retreated to the Hindenburg Line. September, remember, it was the 11th day of the 11th month that they were waiting for, and they still were shooting 1 million rounds a day because, hey, it's money. It's somebody, you already borrowed the money. You might as well use it. But it does not refer to a planned Allied campaign, but rather a rapid series of victories where the armistice was being set up. They called it Operation Michael. And then technically, they didn't surrender. They just signed a let's stop peaceful penetration, the Battle of Amiens. Look at that. This is how many people they had. And they lost 119,000. 10% exactly. Something happened, but it had to be somewhat, I think, fake, because the world was discovered, found, and rebuilt. The whole deal with the armistice, they did have some people line up and march to their death. They did have that shell shockedness. There's pictures and places, all because of Franz Ferdinand. And when Whitey was ruling the world, well, at least the rich whites were ruling the world. These became popular. I mean, look at today, famous people who wear toupees. These are only the known people who wear toupees. Because, we're not vain, are we? Oh, wait, look at the President of the United States. He thinks that makes his hair look perfect. This list goes on, and I think you've heard, probably heard of a lot of them. But you're not going to get on TV unless you're wearing it because they had an idea of what they wanted a man to look like back then. That's not today. What's with the pictures from the past and the few people who do this today? No picture of Donald Trump? Wait, anyway, is the comb over dying? I'll get serious. Un momento. Academic coup. Wait, I thought I was going to have that thing about the comb over. People go bald. They pumped this thing up from the 1950s. Anyway, there's some graphs in here. Nobody cared about it until they started making movies. And then all of a sudden, and they sold it downstream that, rub poison on your hair, dye your hair, then turn it pink, not knowing it's right there on your brain, that these things are bad for you. I thought I had some deeper topics. Now, here's where you're going to see, and I was going to stop it and show you as they're cruising the cut. Cruise it.
The main thing you notice about the tunnel, and very quickly, is how varied the walls and ceiling are. Sometimes it's brick-lined, then there's a bit with steel girders,
riveted steel girders,
followed by concrete slabs.
That must be that Roman concrete because it doesn't wear out.
And back to brick again. From the noise, you'd think you're about to go through a waterfall. And in fact, you do get soggy 2 or 3 times, but here it's just water feeding into the canal, which is also a lot deeper than usual. I'm sure I
You still looking at the roof and stuff?
was told it's about 17 feet because this summit level is used as a reservoir for the rest of the canal. After concrete comes frankly
You know, they found it and they didn't put the bricks over this part, but these are the parts of the Titan that are left open that were the natural veins, arteries, nerves, blood vessels, maybe whatever did not get solidified. It wasn't a gemstone, you know, washes away as sand. Here comes more of the Titan as it, you know, had to go through maybe a rougher part. You know, as long as it was solid and they could, you know, build it. Look at it. All rocks are body parts. We are living stones reserved in judgment. That's what's underneath our world. They found it, they built on it. They all went out and built cities. And then when it's like, okay, we're going to need to stretch it out here. Hey, what's up, guys? No towpath? Too expensive? You know, they found those tunnels, right? It all comes down to this. This is 7 years old. Everybody knows it was a conspiracy. They set it up. They were going to do it. So this
Tossing a
one,
match into a powder
4
keg.
years old.
Serbian nationalism is rising. The Balkans are in a tumult of diplomatic crises and regional wars. And tensions between the Kingdom of Serbia and the Austro-Hungarian Empire are set to spill over. But despite warnings and ill omens, the royal couple's security is extremely lax. They board an open-top sports car and proceed in a 6-car motorcade along a pre-announced route. After an inspection of the military barracks, they head toward the town hall for a scheduled reception by the mayor. The visit is going ahead exactly as planned and precisely on schedule. And then, the bomb goes off. As we now know, the motorcade was a death trap. 6 assassins lined the royal couple's route that morning, armed with bombs and pistols. The first 2 failed to act, but the third, Nedeljko Chabrinovic, panicked and threw his bomb into the folded back of the Archduke's convertible. It bounced off onto the street, exploding under the next car in the convoy. Franz Ferdinand and his wife, unscathed, were rushed onto the town hall, passing the other assassins along the route too quickly for them to act. Having narrowly escaped death, the Archduke called off the rest of his scheduled itinerary to visit the wounded from the bombing at the hospital. By a remarkable twist of fate, the driver took the couple down the...
Don't go for that. My warning now is it wasn't a remarkable twist of fate. It was all planned up history that was going to be sold to us. That it did this and that because there were scars in the remnants of Armageddon that needed to be explained, as others were. The Freemasons, the Rosicrucians had the plans of how to reintroduce it, and like, look what we discovered. And of course the Confucians and the Hindus, you know, they're pretty smart. They're in on it. It's all the mafia. It's all the wide road. They're leading their minions down the primrose path. They want to blame World War I because of all the devastation that we see. That was Armageddon and the reaping, because after the 1,000 years, we had a population reset. After the 1,000 years, it was the put in your sickle and reap, good and bad. And then, you know, we may be genetically engineered, but something's going on with us after the loosening of Satan, because we're not as strong or smart as they were 100 years ago. World War I conspiracy. Everybody knows it was a conspiracy.
On the wrong route, and when ordered to reverse, stopped the car directly in front of the delicatessen where would-be assassin Gavrilo Princip had gone after having failed in his mission along the motorcade. There, 1.5 meters in front of Princip, was the Archduke and his wife. He took 2 shots, killing both of them. Yes, even the official history books, the books written and published by the winners, record that the First World War started as the result of a conspiracy. After all, it was, as all freshman history students are taught, the conspiracy to assassinate the Archduke Franz Ferdinand that led to the outbreak of war. That story, the official story of the origins of World War I, is familiar enough by now. In 1914, Europe was an interlocking clockwork of alliances and military mobilization plans that, once set in motion, ticked inevitably toward all-out warfare. The assassination of the Archduke was merely the excuse to set that clockwork in motion, and the resulting July crisis of diplomatic and military escalations led with perfect predictability to continental and, eventually, global war. In this carefully sanitized version of history, World War I starts in Sarajevo on June 28, 1914. But this official history leaves out so much of the real story about the build-up to war that it amounts to a lie. But it does get one thing right. The First World War was the result of a conspiracy. To understand this conspiracy, we must turn not to Sarajevo and the conclave of Serbian nationalists plotting their assassination in the summer of 1914, but to a chilly drawing room in London in the winter of 1891. There, 3 of the most important men of the age, men whose names are but dimly remembered today, are taking the first concrete steps toward forming a secret society that they have been discussing amongst themselves for years. The group that springs from this meeting will go on to leverage the wealth and power of its members to shape the course of history and, 23 years later, will drive the world into the first truly global war. Their plan reads like outlandish historical fiction. They will form a secret organization dedicated to the extension of British rule throughout the world and the ultimate recovery of the United States of America as an integral part of a British
This is their history. Probably not true.
empire. The group is to be structured along the lines of
But only, they're exposing the lie that some of it's true, but they're not giving you the mud flood was Armageddon explanation that separates you as being one step closer to the truth, as I mentioned earlier.
a religious brotherhood. The Jesuit order is repeatedly invoked as a model, divided into 2 circles. An inner circle, called the Society of the Elect, who are to direct the activity of the larger outer circle, dubbed the Association of Helpers, who are not to know of the inner circle's existence. British rule and inner circles and secret societies. If presented with this plan today, many would say it was the work of an imaginative comic book writer.
Together. And Edward Grey shared this anti-German feeling with the king, as I explained in my book, how he came to have that attitude about Germany. But in any case, he had the same attitude with the king. They worked very well together. And Edward Grey very freely acknowledged the heavy role that the king played in British foreign policy. And he says that this was not a problem because he and the king were in an agreement on most issues. And so they worked very well together.
That's because they weren't brothers? The king of Germany, the king of England, they're all incestuously related.
Who charge us as they print money out of thin air and charge future generations for it.
The election of Woodrow Wilson once again shows how power operates behind the scenes to subvert the popular vote and the will of the public. Knowing that the stuffy and politically unknown Wilson would have little chance of being elected over the more popular and affable William Howard Taft, Morgan and his banking allies bankrolled Teddy Roosevelt on a third-party ticket to split the Republican vote. The strategy worked, and the banker's real choice, Woodrow Wilson, came to power with just 42% of the popular vote.
That's the same as Bill Clinton came to power because they kept running Ross Perot.
With Wilson in office and Colonel House directing his actions, Morgan and his conspirators got their wish. 1913 saw the passage of both the Federal Income Tax and the Federal Reserve Act, thus consolidating Wall Street's control over the economy. World War I, brewing in Europe just 8 months after the creation of the Federal Reserve, was to be the first full test of that power. But difficult as it had been for the Round Table to coax the British Empire out of its splendid isolation from the continent and into the web of alliances that precipitated the war, it would be that much harder for their American fellow travelers to coax the United States out of its own isolationist machine gun and all of the other mechanized implements of destruction that made mass slaughter a mundane fact of warfare. But this is only a partial answer. More than just technology was at play in this Great War, and military strategy and million-casualty battles were not the only ways that World War I had changed the world forever.
You know, when you lose 1 million people, that's a big deal. It is a big deal because and they're leaving the ones who were played up, who would enlist, who wanted to prove they were a man, who wanted to come home not shell-shocked. They thought it was the only way to do it. This was the war to end all wars. So they said.
Like that unimaginable artillery assault at Verdun, the First World War tore apart all the verities of the old world, leaving a smoldering wasteland in its wake. A wasteland that could be reshaped into a new world order. For the would-be engineers of society, war, with all of its attendant horrors, was the easiest way to demolish the old traditions and beliefs that lay between them and their goals. This was recognized early on by Cecil Rhodes and his original clique of co-conspirators. As we have seen, it was less than 1 decade after the founding of Cecil Rhodes' society to achieve the peace of the world that vision was amended to include war in South Africa, and then amended again to include embroiling the British Empire in a world war. Many others became willing participants in that conspiracy because they too could profit from the destruction and the bloodshed. And the easiest way to understand this idea is at its most literal level: profit.
War is a racket. It always has been. It is possibly the oldest, easily the most profitable, surely the most vicious. It is the only one international in scope. It is the only one in which the profits are reckoned in dollars and the losses in lives. A racket is best described, I believe, as something that is not what it seems to be to the majority of the people. Only a small inside group knows what it is about. It is conducted for the benefit of the very few at the expense of the very many. Out of war, a few people make huge fortunes. In the World War, a mere handful garnered the profits of the conflict. At least 21,000 new millionaires and billionaires were made in the United States during the World War. That many admitted their huge blood gains on their income tax returns. How many other war millionaires falsified their tax returns? No one knows. How many of these war millionaires shouldered a rifle? How many of them dug a trench? How many of them knew what it meant to go hungry in a rat-infested dugout? How many of them spent sleepless, frightened nights ducking shells and shrapnel and machine gun bullets? How many of them parried a bayonet thrust or an enemy? How many of them were wounded, were killed in battle?
As the most decorated Marine in the history of the United States at the time of his death, Smedley Butler knew of what he spoke. Having seen the minting of those tens of thousands of new millionaires and billionaires out of the blood of his fellow soldiers, his famous rallying cry, "War is a racket," has resonated with the public since he first began, in his own memorable words, trying to educate the soldiers out of the sucker class. Indeed, the war profiteering on Wall Street started even before America joined the war. In Russia, the Bolsheviks used this German war socialism as a basis for their organization of the nascent Soviet Union. In Canada, the government rushed to nationalize railways, outlaw alcohol, institute official censorship of newspapers, levy conscription, and, infamously, introduce a personal income tax as a so-called February Revolution when Tsar Nicholas was swept from power and a provisional government installed in his place. But that provisional government, which continued to prosecute the war at the behest of its French and British allies, was competing for control of the country with the Petrograd Soviet, a rival power structure set up by the socialists in the Russian capital. The struggle for control between the two bodies led to riots, protests, and ultimately, battles in the street.
They're going to have battles in the street. I wonder what they have planned for us now.
Let alone the very interesting history behind it, let alone what that really means in the bigger story.
Over 2 decades after Cecil Rhodes launched the secret society that would engineer this so-called Great War, the likes of Alfred Milner and Walter Rothschild were still at it, conspiring to use the war they had brought about to further their own geopolitical agenda. But by the time of the armistice in November 1918, that group of conspirators had greatly expanded, and the scale of their agenda had grown along with it. This was no small circle of friends who had embroiled the world in the first truly global war, but a loosely knit network of overlapping interests.
Freemasons, Jesuits. You have it in 1 hour of how you can be one step closer to the truth. You see the deception. You see the money. You know these things are going away. You have to make the decision. You really don't own anything in the world you're living in. In the world I'm asking you to consider, the world of runaway, live to live another day, protect our young and old, and just stay out of their way. I would appeal to that tonight when I get more into theology, but everything is a conspiracy, and you're the one being set up because it's a flat earth nation. The golden age is past. The mud flood was Armageddon. Me and my friends will never tell you anything else because we know we're called, chosen, and being faithful to having your best interest at heart. Amen. Hallelujah. Aho, aloha, arrivederci. Ciao, sayonara, auf Wiedersehen. Nakaman, adios, amigos, from the border of southern Colorado and New Mexico.